If you've been told that immersion is all you need to learn a language, you've been lied to. Welcome to Jouzu Juls. My name is Juls, but you can call me Chafe. Immersion works, and it is probably the most effective method of learning a language. However, I do believe that immersion is somewhat overinflated by people who don't really understand what immersion is. Here are the 5 claims that I hear people running around with. Number 1, instead of comprehensible input, immersion is all you need. This is not true because comprehensible input and immersion are not the same thing. Comprehensible input is the term for the thing that we need in order to acquire language. Immersion is simply a method of getting comprehensible input. It is a mistake to automatically discard every other method without looking at whether or not it involves comprehensible input. People who are doing immersion correctly will be looking for N+1 sentences, and these are sentences that are a little bit harder than what they currently know. In other words, immersion is a method that directly allows the learner to get comprehensible input. This means that other activities, such as like in the case for Chinese and Japanese, learning kanji, or in the case of most other languages, learning grammar, these activities are not useless because they give you the tools to get more comprehensible input. 2. Studying a language is absolutely useless. The main source of this claim comes from people misinterpreting what Krashen said. Krashen differentiated between learning languages and acquiring languages. He then focused most of his work around acquiring language. Most of us have heard of the input hypothesis, but he actually has 5 hypotheses. One of these is called the acquisition learning hypothesis, which states that we have 2 ways of acquiring languages. First is subconscious acquisition, and second is deliberate acquisition. Note his word choice. He first differentiated between learning and acquisition, then subdivided acquisition into 2 different parts. Deliberate learning and deliberate acquisition are 2 different things. For someone to say that Krashen says that learning languages is a bad thing or a useless thing is to completely contradict Krashen's own argument, because fundamentally, Krashen states that in order for language acquisition to happen, we must understand the input, meaning anything that helps us understand the input helps language acquisition. There are 2 more hypotheses from Krashen that seemingly debunk this, but as you will come to see, they are once again misinterpretations. First of all, the natural order hypothesis seems to debunk that teaching does anything good because we only acquire things in a certain order and they're immune to being deliberately taught. If you've been paying attention, you'll realize that this comment has absolutely nothing to do with deliberately learning things. Krashen simply said that deliberate learning will not help you directly acquire things, and we already know this is true because language acquisition happens subconsciously. Active study or deliberate learning helps you get comprehensible input, which will lead to acquisition. But whether you do acquire it and in what order you acquire it will completely depend on your subconscious. As for the monitor hypothesis, which suggests that we shouldn't actively study because it causes us to overthink, if we know something to be correct and true and we have already acquired this part of the language, we should be able to say this smoothly and automatically. Conversely, if we have not yet acquired this part of the language, whether or not you have done any active study will not change your ability to output this thing because you have not yet acquired it. I'm not saying that either of these hypotheses are wrong, by the way. I'm just saying that they're being misapplied. We cannot acquire what we do not understand, but we can understand what we have not acquired. If I teach you a specific grammar point or a specific kanji and then give you examples immediately after, you will be able to understand all those sentences. You may not be able to use the specific grammar or the specific kanji immediately, but that's not the point. In other words, using active study alongside immersion to make sure you get comprehensible input is a vastly more effective and efficient method of learning than just immersion. Number 3, output is absolutely useless. To understand this, we have to first understand the affective filter hypothesis. An affective filter is an invisible wall in our mind that prevents our brains from acquiring language. The higher your motivation and self-confidence, the lower the affective filter and the more you can acquire. Conversely, the higher the anxiety, the higher the affective filter and the less you can acquire. Negative factors that raise the affective filter are error correction, forced output, isolation, embarrassment, and lack of comprehensible input. Controlled output solves 3 of these problems at once. First of all, if you're not being forced output, then that factor's already gone. Second of all, you won't be isolated because you have people to talk to in that language and actually have a fun time. And third of all, embarrassment can be solved by creating a safe environment. By doing so, you can directly increase your motivation and self-confidence and decrease your anxiety, thus decreasing the affective filter and acquiring more of the language. Yes, the error correction factor still exists. However, I believe this depends on the individual. For example, if I make an error and somebody corrects me, for me, that further motivates me because I know where I made an error and I know how to go fix it. Yeah, sometimes you get corrected literally every 5 seconds. Either you're not actually ready to output yet, and if that's the case, don't worry about it because everyone has been there at some point. You just have to work a bit harder and level yourself up, or more likely, the other guy's just a dickhead. Some other benefits other than decreasing the affective filter are that you can develop your hand muscle memory when you're writing the words, your finger muscle memory when you're typing the text, whether you're on phone or on your keyboard, and of course, everything related to producing sound in your mouth. Try to make someone who doesn't speak Japanese say "taberareru" 3 times fast. Taberareru, taberareru, taberareru. Done. 4. Making mistakes is a crime against humanity. Apparently, some people believe that making mistakes is bad because every time you make a mistake, some poor starving child dies somewhere in the world. Well, sorry to tell you, but that will happen regardless of whether you make mistakes or not. The people telling you that mistakes are bad will tell you that mistakes are bad because it builds bad habits. These bad habits take forever to fix. They use an example like you're constructing a building. Once the foundation has been laid, it cannot be changed, sort of thing. Every single time you take a floor out, it will affect all the floors above. It's almost like we're not even building a building anymore, we're building a Jenga tower. And the wildest part about all of this is they say all this while telling you not to do active study. Think about that for a second. Without doing anything else and relying 100% solely on immersion, everything that you know about the language is built solely on trial and error. If this is the approach that you adapt, then your entire method is based upon replacing the foundation over and over again. Not only will you not be able to build upon this because it gets replaced every 3 seconds, but when you can build on it, every single floor gets replaced every 3 seconds. Furthermore, bad habits can be fixed without having to disrupt the foundation. If you say something wrong consistently, like my girlfriend used to say, open the lights when she meant turn on the lights, fixing that has no effect on her foundation on English. The only thing that does affect is anything related to turning on electronics. That's not hard to fix now, is it? It's not gonna destroy her English. Now, conversely, if you have a bad understanding of some really basic grammar point, fixing something like that would completely change the foundation of the language. Just take a look at how many people are confused about the wa and the ga particles in Japanese. Some people don't even know that the ga particle is fundamental to the Japanese language. And if you don't know that, you can check out this video up here. Don't make mistakes you don't have to make, but don't worry about making mistakes because they can be fixed. 5. Native language subtitles and translations don't work. Now, I was actually a believer of this for the longest time. I forget who it was, but somebody quoted a Spanish research paper that said that Spanish people learning English reportedly had a 0% in their English ability after watching an English show with Spanish subtitles. Without the subtitles, it showed a 3% increase, and with English subtitles, it showed a 7% increase. People then take this research paper and run around with a claim that native language subtitles will give you a 0% increase, and therefore it is 100% ineffective. However, we know this is not true. Use your brain for a second and don't take the research at face value. What is a weeb? What do weebs do? Imagine a weeb for a second. You have this guy who just started watching anime. He's running around typing in Romaji, adding chan and san to everyone's name. How did he know all these words despite watching anime only using subtitles? So let's put this bogus Spanish experiment to the side and look at this from another perspective. If you watch an entire anime with English subs, you will know the story and you'll know what's going on. Now, if you rewatch the anime with no subs or Japanese subs, wouldn't you say that you would have a better understanding of what's going on? In other words, wouldn't you say that there would be more comprehensible input? You know, you ever have those sentences where you know every single word and you know all the grammar in it, and yet for some reason it just doesn't want to make sense? But then you look up the translation and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, of course that's what that means. Stupid. Duh, right? Well, if you watched the entire show with English subtitles first and you actually understood what's going on, you have the context to figure out what that sentence means by yourself now, don't you? All of a sudden, some of these sentences that you would not have been able to figure out otherwise become comprehensible. Now, of course, at a higher level, you don't need the native language subtitles. You can just watch it as it is and you'll be fine. But for a beginner, maybe someone who's easing into watching their first anime without English subtitles for the first time ever, it may be a good idea to choose an anime that you've already watched before and that you really like, because you already know what's happening and you can understand all the words being used a lot better. The next video will teach you how to watch Japanese anime with Japanese subtitles and automatically filter out every single word that you don't know so you can learn them individually. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified when it comes out, or join our Discord server as well. Cheers!